Good morning, everybody.
Good morning, Mr. Ryan. How you doing?
Doing great. How about you?
Excellent, excellent.
Yeah. So for those of you who don't know, this is Ray Dumais, and Ray Dumais is my grandfather. So I call him Pepe. You might hear me refer to him as Pepe here on this call. So I called Pepe a couple weeks ago now, right? And I said, hey, we've never done like a podcast together. You wanna try recording a podcast? And so here we are. I said, yeah, let's set it up. We usually do a call every Thursday morning anyways, right? To just catch up and chat.
Correct.
And yeah, I mean, you were immediately like, yeah, that's a great idea. So
Yeah.
it was nice to have that enthusiasm. I think that made me feel like, okay, maybe this is a good idea.
And it's kind of cool, Ryan, because I don't know too many people that call their grandson or grandson calls the grandfather and chat about different aspects of life, different facets of success principles. So this is pretty cool, actually.
Yeah. I agree. I think one of the things that inspired me to say, like, maybe we should record these conversations is I was leaving them going, wow, I really got a lot from that conversation with Pepe. you
Right.
know, maybe other people could get some value from these conversations as well. So
Very, very definitely. I think if I mentioned I started my own channel, I haven't recorded anything yet, but wisdom and wellness. Young people taking advantage of their own experiences, but also taking advantage of experiences of older people, and kind of mentoring style conversations sometimes. And I think it's pretty cool. So we talked about different things, right? We talked about the difference between the schooling and education.
yeah,
And,
I think that's what we wanted to make this conversation in particular about today, right? The difference between schooling and education.
correct.
Yeah, I know we both have some pretty passionate thoughts about this. You want to dive in first, or do you want me to start with my story?
Yeah, just let me just talk about a friend of mine in Quebec. I was he invited me to speak at one of his leadership conferences, and on the educational program that we're using, mentoring, books, association, and personal development. And he says, Ray, in French, there's a difference between education and schooling. If you don't mind talking about those two different things. So I'll let you go on from here. That's how we got into the conversation, you and I. So go ahead.
Yeah, well, I think at this point, a lot of people know my story, but if they don't know it, I'm definitely happy to sort of retell it. When I was in high school, I was a pretty good student, and I received a full scholarship to Southern New Hampshire University, a local university. And I think, most of our family, I think you were excited. I think my parents were excited. Everyone was like, all right, awesome. This is going to be really good for Ryan. But in high school, I felt like I did not want to go to college. To me, I feel like I had started to sort of recognize that a college degree didn't really mean what it used to mean.
Right.
And there is an aspect to getting a college degree, which is like, it is a credential that signals your competence to potential employers, right? And so a lot of employers use it as a filter for general competence. Like, okay, you're smart enough to get a degree, you're probably smart enough for me to employ, and you'll probably do a good job in my business. But my thought process was, is going to college going to teach me information that I can then use to make more money? Like, is it going to teach me how to provide more value in the marketplace to my customers? And to me, based on my very amateur 18-year-old analysis, the answer to that question was no. I don't think I'm going to get information in college that will, sort of provide more value in the marketplace. I'm going to get a degree that will signal my competence to potential employers, but I'm not necessarily going to receive, insider information or, helpful information generally on how to be a more effective businessman. And for me, I mean, I sort of knew from the beginning, like, I'm not, I don't want to be a surgeon, I don't want to be a lawyer, I want to just go into business generally. I just want to find a way to provide value in the marketplace. And so I did end up going to SNU for one semester, and I dropped out. And the reason that I dropped out is because my experience while I was there was sort of exactly what I anticipated, right? I think I've shared this with you, but I was taking an entrepreneurship class, right? And so there was a professor of entrepreneurship, and he was teaching us, the best way to structure a business. And I just, raised my hand in class one day, and I was like, so how many businesses have you started? And, that question kind of pissed him off. He's like, well, I have studied business for nearly 30 years. I have worked with some of the top CEOs in America. And I was like, yeah. How many business, you're teaching entrepreneurship, how many businesses have you started? And, the answer was 0.
Yeah.
To me, I was kind of like, okay, what the hell am I doing here? Why am I learning how to start businesses from someone who hasn't started any businesses?
Correct.
But I think you and I would agree that schooling does have a purpose. I don't know if you can talk about that at all, like what you see as the purpose of schooling, because I don't want to totally poo-poo schooling. I mean, I definitely would distinguish it between education and, right, someone can have a lot of schooling but not really be well educated, and someone can be pretty well educated but not necessarily have a lot of schooling. So I guess, what do you sort of see as the difference between those two, and what role, if any, do you see schooling playing?
Yeah, no, that's exciting. Interesting, Ryan, because I know some of both. I know highly educated people with very little schooling that are very successful. On the other hand, I know a lot schooled people, degreed people that are not very successful. So it's interesting because both have a purpose. If you want to be a doctor, an accountant, or there's certain classes that you want to, skills that you want to learn, and school is necessary. On the other hand, I tell people I've got a bachelor's in the field of education. I've got a master's degree in the field of adult education. So, that's interesting. And I tell people I got my degrees at the university, but I got my education through the mentorship program, through the personal development program, through reading other books, through affiliation and association with different successful people that I wanted to, become like. And, it's a whole thing about learning different facets of life. We talked about, just I call wellness and financial wellness, health wellness. I just saw that you put out your new podcast on the health and physical and financial and spiritual wellness and stuff. So all that is important. But to me, at 79 years old, I'm still learning. I'm not there yet. And sometimes schooling says, okay, I'm done school, I'm done learning, which is, to me, is a big fallacy.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's very sad to me how many people stop learning when they graduate high school, even, or before.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. To me, it's like learning is a lifelong process, and you need different degrees and certifications to get the different jobs. But it's interesting. Most of the information we learn in school is non-relevant to what we're going to be doing after we leave school. So, as you mentioned a while ago, it's a documentation that you can learn, but the contents is not necessarily applicable, which is kind of interesting. I remember when you gave me a call, Ryan, you say, "Can we have lunch, Pepere?" And we had lunch, and you had a sheet, a pad like this, a sheet and a half of reasons why I should not be here at this university. And we went through this. And I said, I understand, and I agree because of the woke culture, the
Hmm.
environment, the influence of other people, and most young people leaving home for the first time don't have a lot of direction. So it creates a certain atmosphere.
Hmm.
When did you discover this atmosphere for yourself?
Well, you mean the atmosphere that is, that sort of made me uncomfortable in college, you mean?
Right, right.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I originally started sniffing it out in high school, even
Yeah,
sort of recognizing, because to me, right, government schools are funded via taxation, right? So I think it's pretty difficult for them to always have the most objective view of, you know, taxation and the government school system.
right.
I mean, personally, I would love to see a separation of government and schooling. I think that bringing schooling back into the private sector would be excellent for students and for families and for teachers, and I mean, really for the whole world.
Yeah,
um, but so I would say initially I sort of sniffed it out in high school, and the thing that made it apparent to me was I had a teacher that I was pretty close with. You probably remember him, Mr. Van Uwick.
yeah,
And he was, I would say, not a typical public school teacher, right? He taught U.S. and American history. He was a constitutionalist. He was a libertarian, and he was pretty vocal about, his sort of small government views, and that really put a target on his back. And I saw that, other teachers talking about him, other teachers sort of saying, "Oh yeah, him and his, the stuff that he's teaching. I don't know if I agree with it. I don't know if it's the right way to look at it." And I thought, that's interesting, because he had sites, he had sources, he had a master's degree in American history.
right.
So to me, he seemed like a pretty credible source, but they just didn't like his version of things, you know. So to me, I sort of recognized that. And then when I went to college, oh man, it was like a different league. I remember, they had all the freshmen go through a mandatory sexual assault education seminar,
Yeah,
which was like how to not, it was targeted. I mean, they made it broad, but it was pretty clearly targeted at men, and it was like how to not sexually assault a woman. Um, and in a way, I can appreciate that, right? Like college campuses are sometimes where these kinds of events happen. But to me, it's like I don't need a class on that. Could
right.
be hubris, but I'm like, hey guys, I'm here to learn how to provide value in the marketplace. I don't really need this lesson on how to not assault women. And then there were some other there were things all throughout the campus about racial justice, social justice, economic justice, whatever. Justice to me, it's like this word fair. Like when people start throwing around the word fair, I'm like, ooh, I consider that to sort of be like the second F-bomb is like fair.
Right.
'Cause, you know but anyways, so I think that's sort of where I started to recognize it in college, and yeah, when we met and got lunch, that was definitely one of the things that I listed was I don't think that this culture, I didn't feel very welcome there,
Mm.
right? And then that made it difficult for me to feel like I could be myself in that kind of environment.
Yeah, it's interesting. And when I was in college, I hadn't been exposed to the entrepreneurial too much. The free market economy. The independent learning. Becoming. Just creating your own thoughts, creating your own life. I was kind of socialistic in my approach, and college to me is like back then it was a bit different. But we're talking about that with May yesterday. When I went to college, we had to be in at 11 o'clock at night. There was no visitation of other, genders in the rooms. Weekend, we had to be in at 12. And 7 years later, same college, my brother goes and then there's one floor of men and one floor of women, coolers of beer all over the place.
Mm.
So I said, wow, what a difference in 7 years of the culture and the environment
Mm.
and long-term influences of our environment still impacts us, how we think and how we develop. So it's interesting. And I know you mentioned one time, you said, Pepe, I'm not sure I'm strong enough to stay in this environment and
Yeah.
function as a healthy person
Yeah.
long term. And that's what kind of created a little bit of yeah, you're right. You were exposed to the education. I remember one time you were an entrepreneur. I know, 14 years old, you put signs around the neighborhood. You wanted to raise money and make money, and you were not old enough to get a job, but you put signs around the neighborhood, and then you got some jobs working for people, painting, cleaning, and
Yeah.
then, if I remember correctly, that this guy was refurbishing phones, and he liked your attitude, and he hired you full
Yes.
time,
Yeah, that's right, Rick.
right? And
Yep.
and so the whole process of you were at a young age seeking entrepreneurial and opportunities instead of waiting for things to happen. You made things happen.
Yes. Yes, exactly. Yeah. And thankfully, I think that same sort of behavior pattern has helped me now as an adult. I mean, I've started my own property management business. Now I employ 26 people. We manage nearly 900 apartments.
Yeah,
So yeah, I've tried to continue not waiting for things to happen or not hoping things happen, but making things happen, right?
correct,
Yeah.
correct.
There's one other aspect of education versus schooling that I just wanted to talk with you about too. And to me, I'm 28. I'm Gen Z, right? And I do not recall a period of my life where I haven't had access to the internet.
Mm,
And so to me, right, the internet, and now especially AI, you and I
yeah,
have both started using AI this year. Like the purpose of schooling to me is much clearer in a pre-internet era. It's like, okay, we have information that we have to transmit and train people on. And doctors have to study and memorize this information because they need to recall it when they're in the field, right? But with the advent of the internet and the advent of unlimited free information, the purpose of transmitting information in that way seems, much more diminished to me,
hmm,
right? It's like I don't need to memorize every single real estate law. If I'm in a position where I need to see if there's a relevant law, I can just look it up.
right,
you
right.
know and so, I remember when I was in math class in middle school, right? They wouldn't let us use calculators because they would say, well, what are you just going to have a calculator on you at all times? And now, 13 years later, yeah, I have a
Yes,
calculator on me at all times. Now, I think you still need to understand the principle. Yeah, there you go, right?
on the phone, right?
Now, I think you still need to understand the principles of mathematics, right? I think that's key, because if you don't even know how to structure the equation, then you don't even know what to put into the calculator to
Right.
calculate. But does that really need to be transmitted in like a classroom setting? Does that need to be one teacher to 20 students in person?
Mm,
Is that the most optimal, setup? And then now we're starting to develop machines that can think, right? That can synthesize information, that can work with you as thinking partners, right? If I were to open up, Claude or ChatGPT or Grok right now, I could say, how does algebra work? And it would give me, a straightforward explanation. Or I could say, I have this square and I need to figure out how much space is in the square. Can you tell me how to figure that out? And it would teach me immediately.
right.
Right. So it's almost as if we're going into this age now where we have a master teacher available 24/7. And
Exactly.
then I'm really sort of questioning what the role of schooling is in a situation like that. Like, pre-internet, pre-AI,
Hmm.
the purpose of school is clear to me. Post-internet, post-AI, it's really getting tough to, understand what the purpose is and what the value is to sort of the traditional, go to school 5 days a week, 7 hours a day, and then come home.
Yeah. And
Have you been feeling that way too?
the change, Ryan. I mean, I made, 30, 40 years ago, I made the statement that I was sitting at a desk as director of adult education. And I told my boss, I says, he was putting computers on our desks. I says, I don't think I'll use one of those. So, don't bother putting one of those on my desk. I actually said that. Here I am, a degreed, they're schooled, individual. And this was in a day where the fax machine was, highly innovative.
Yeah.
And today, as you said, the technology is amazing.
I see a lot of people doing that with AI now. Honestly, they're like, "Oh, AI, no, I don't need to use that. I don't want to use that." It's interesting. Similar thing.
Exactly. They're kind of unknown, but it scares them. But it is a great tool. Again, it's a leverage of our time, our skills, and the knowledge at our fingertips all the time. It's interesting. I can't imagine, your two sons, you got, one 3-year-old and one 1-year-old, correct? I can't imagine their world as far as technology goes in the schooling and the information.
Yeah. Well, I think you know that our intention is to homeschool. And one of the reasons that we seek to homeschool is because, to me, I really sort of question, what the value and purposes of schooling now,
Yeah. And I think in many ways it's obsolete, because schooling was designed originally, like the rows that teach people to go work for somebody else, actually. But today, I think education is all, as you said, all around us, and we have to take that opportunity to learn, interact with people, and the whole. To me, education is the soft skills. Respect, the character. Just influencing people, listening skills. Most people today lack these, what I call soft skills, or really the skills to become successful that you use in your business every day with your people. I've got a master's degree in the field of adult education. I've never once had a class on listening.
That's incredible. Yeah.
Or developing people skills or speaking skills. They teach us how to read, how to write. How about listening?
Yeah.
Isn't it one of the greatest?
How about writing goals? You ever have a class on writing goals?
None.
Wow. I mean, geez, talk about a key life skill, huh?
I know, right? Exactly.
Yeah.
It's interesting. And I know, for example, that, looking at that, if you don't have any directions or write downs where you want to be, how do you want to live, are we going to get there?
Right.
The whole facet of continuous schooling. I remember you taking the course in the Toastmaster one time.
Yes. Yeah. I was in Toastmasters for a year or two.
And you were by far the youngest person in that group.
Yeah, that was fun.
Remember some of the people you met and the start of the mentorship program, taking advantage of the older people, or not necessarily taking advantage of them, taking advantage of their experiences and their wisdom.
Yes.
Tell me about that part of education.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that one of the challenges with schooling is that it can be difficult to develop, personal mentorship relationships, because the teacher has so many students, right? Usually somewhere between 10 to maybe 30 on the high end. You don't always get the opportunity to develop a one-on-one relationship. Whereas in other environments, in business and life and private clubs and things like that, where you interact more on a peer level, I think it's oftentimes easier to meet people who you can develop that one-on-one mentorship relationship with. And I mean, that's been critical to my success, my personal development. I mean, my relationship with you, your family. So it's a little different. But I remember in particular, I met this guy in Toastmasters. His name is Dan Latouche.
Yep.
And he was a plumber. and he was, impressed by the speeches that I was giving, and I was impressed by the speeches that he was giving. So I expressed as such, and he took a liking to me. We started getting lunch, and then he introduced me to some people that he knew that were real estate investors, and that sort of helped me to develop my interest in real estate investing. And all of that would not have happened had we not been in an environment that would have been conducive to something like that. So yeah, I think like the mentorship relationships are key, and oftentimes it can be difficult to develop these in a school-like environment.
Because it's so huge. And again, I think you've got a perimeter kind of that stops a little bit of the creativity. You figure young people learn how to walk, how to talk, how to eat. By the time they're 5 years old, and then they go to school.
Yeah.
And it's a fact that the longer a person stays in school, the less creativity they have, and which is kind of to me opposite of what education should be. But that the schooling model has been set up a long time ago. It has not changed that much over the last 50 years, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of crazy that we're still doing the same thing that we were doing in the 1930s.
Yeah.
no,
most
for the most part, yeah. I mean, now I get like a Chromebook when I go to school.
Right.
Now you were a school teacher for what, 20 years, 15 years?
Oh my gosh. I taught school for a few years, and then eventually, I started a business and got into the, mentorship, entrepreneurship, learning and teaching and coaching other people to become successful. My motto is to help people realize their full potential, no matter if it's a student, a colleague, kids, grandkids, my wife, to help people develop their full potential. That's kind of my mission statement, if you will. And the key is, I was able to do that in the school because of my mentorship and leadership development. I was able to implement some of those principles within the school structure. I always remember I worked in Goffstown for 17 years, and I went there for a year I was, downtime with my business. I needed to do something else with my life. And I went there so I'll go try this out. I ended up by staying 17 years in that school system. It was a beautiful school system. And was able to help, to me, young people. I call them, people develop real life skills, goal setting, financial education, setting goals, dealing, respecting within the context of teaching. I started an internship program for high school students. The different things that gives them real life experiences. So it's interesting.
If you were my college professor, maybe I wouldn't have dropped out.
I know, right? But it's interesting. You gotta. Well, let me ask you. Your little guys, your two sons, as they grow up, is it important to somewhat guide their environment to see who they frequent as they grow older, little 10, 12, 15, 16? Is the environment important for them?
Of course. Yeah, it's critical. Yeah, it's critical.
Why?
Well, because my job as a parent is to keep my children safe and help them to thrive, right? And so there are certain environmental toxins that I would not tolerate. Like if we lived in a house that was filled with asbestos, I would move. If our water had, arsenic in it, I would get a water filter.
Right.
And yet people, for some reason, don't apply this to other people. So, there are lots of toxic people out there, that
Yep.
have like dangerous beliefs or self-destructive beliefs, or they're abusive people. And so, just like I wouldn't live in a home with asbestos, or I wouldn't have arsenic in my water, I absolutely want to filter that and ensure that the people that are around my kids and around my family, are positive, uplifting, encouraging, respectful, smart, virtuous, honest. So yeah, absolutely, that's important. It's critical.
My question is, at what age does this stop?
Well, I don't think it stops, but at some point I delegate it to them, right? And I
Right,
hope that
right.
I've taught them well enough. I'm saying, okay, all right, you're responsible for your environment now. Here's
Yeah,
sort of the filter that I've applied. You have to develop your own filter. Good luck.
right.
you
But
know, but
for the kids, but as far as us, I'm talking about,
oh yeah, I mean
right,
I still do that now.
right. So I know
Yeah.
you have a mastermind group that you get together, like-minded. You're all different professions, but
Yes.
you have the basic principles, the character, principles of success. And to me, here I am, almost 80 years old, Ryan, and I'm so excited about life. I'm excited about having a purpose. I'm
Mm.
excited about, growing. I'm not there yet. So
Yeah.
I see some people, they're old at 65 years old.
Yeah.
And I see there's so much potential, so much things. So to me, I control my environment even today. I
Yes.
try to avoid toxic situations, negative people, whiners, people that are always looking at the problems,
Yeah.
rather
News
than
and social
the
media too.
solution, right?
Yeah.
And today we're bombarded with that material all the time. I don't
Yeah.
even watch the news, national and local news.
Great. Same. Yeah.
People say, "Wow, yeah, I mentioned that to you one time." One guy said, "You live an isolated life," and you said,
Yeah. No, I live an insulated life.
"Right." You
Yeah.
said, I insulate myself from the negative influences
Right.
that I could be exposed to, which affects my well-being."
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Especially national news, because you don't, as individuals, we don't have levers over the national situation. So if I'm spun up worrying about the situation between China and Taiwan, and I live in New Hampshire, you know, I'm not the president. If I was the president, maybe I'd watch the news.
Sure,
I'm
sure.
not. So I'm going to focus on me and what I can control, and how to best improve my life.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
remember one time, one of my mentors, a great man, his name is Dexter Yeager. He set up a business and set up the system, educational system that we have. And the key is, one time, I mean, the economy goes up and down. And he says, the down cycle, he says one time, you don't control the economy, but you do control your economy,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
And it's the same thing. You have control on certain things, other things you do not have control. And thank God we elect and delegate good people to manage those things for us.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, this has been excellent, Pepe. Yeah, thank you. I think we
Oh,
covered all the points I wanted to make between education and schooling. I feel like we really poo-pooed schooling. I'm not sure if there's anything else we want to add about the benefits to schooling. I mean, maybe I'm okay with I mean, I would certainly say that education is more important than schooling. And if you are going to school or attending school, you should not confuse that with education, and you should not think that your educating is completed when you're done with school.
exactly.
And so maybe that's the point. And there are still things that you need to go to school for, and that school is helpful for. But I think as we continue in the internet age and now the AI age, I think people should consider alternative forms of self-education more and more, especially as they become more effective and like more accessible for the average person.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It sounds good. Totally agree. Have a good day, and we'll talk to you later.
All right. Fantastic. Well, thanks a lot for joining me on this call, Pepe. This was one of our first chats. Maybe we'll do some more, see what people think. And per usual, I get a lot out of our conversation. So thank you.
Yeah, excellent.
All right.
All right.
Okay,
Have a
Pepe.
great day. Bye-bye.